Hey everybody, Alec from Hightouch here. Welcome to our first episode of our new webinar series called the 23-Minute CDP, a webinar series that will walk you all through just how easy it is to get started with Hightouch and what we call the composable customer data platform. In today's episode, we're going to be talking specifically about syncing suppression audiences across ad platforms. And in future episodes, we'll hit on topics like how to set up conversion APIs to ad platforms, as well as how to enhance email targeting with your customer data. So for those of you joining today, live time, feel free to ask questions as I go. Our team will be on the webinar answering questions in the chat. And for those of you who have joined at a later point in time, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or reach out to our team via our website. You can even request a demo. All right, we're going to get started. So fundamentally, I want to make sure everyone here understands what a suppression audience is. It's a relatively simple concept where you are actually just defining who you do not wish to target, right? So when I think about retargeting audiences, I'm saying I do want to go target these people. When I think about suppression audiences, I want to say who I do not wish to go and target. Now, doing so is allowing me to avoid wasting ad spend on customers who I just don't want to target, whether it's customers who are ineligible, maybe they live in a zip code where I can't sell my product, or customers who have already purchased. Maybe I don't want to go and spend ad dollars on them because they're already purchasing and buying my products over time, right? I don't need to go and spend more money on someone who is already purchasing from me. So both of those use cases are very common for suppression. And again, it's a very simple concept, but not enough marketing teams actually use it today. And one of the things that we found is that the reason that they don't use it today is the solutions out in the space are not exactly the easiest to use. So this is one of my more favorite memes, but I think it really does convey the issue that like marketing teams today are just scared of dealing with the solutions at hand, right? So on one hand, you can deal with manual CSV uploads where you're just wasting time, wasting energy to do this like super manual process. And on the second, you're dealing with a CDP or a customer data platform, and you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and months of implementation time. So when you think about things like a manual CSV upload, while you might be doing this once a week or once a month, you're really just wasting advertising spent, right? People are buying from your website or your company on an ongoing basis. So let's say you're even doing this like once every 5 days, manually uploading audiences to your different platforms. What about all the customers who have purchased between days 1 and 5, right? You're wasting your advertising spend by not suppressing those customers. And each day that goes by, it's just more and more dollars that could be better spent elsewhere. On the CDP side, I won't go too far into this, but one of the things that we found at Hightouch and many others in the space as they evolve into what is now being called the composable CDP is these legacy CDP solutions take months to implement. They're very expensive. They don't actually store all your data, and they force you to their own data models and schemas. So CDPs, not exactly the best solution, very painful to implement and expensive. And manual CSV uploads, you're just wasting advertising spend or marketing team time and energy. So what's the solution? Data activation. And we're going to show you today how in 23 minutes or less, using Hightouch, you can go in, define your audiences, any audiences that you wish to suppress directly in Hightouch Customer Studio, and sync them out from your company's store of existing data, likely your data warehouse, into your many different marketing tools. So in 23 minutes, we are going to set up our composable CDP. We're going to sync email and Facebook audiences, and then we're going to enhance them with omni-channel split testing and audience prioritization. That sounds impossible. I wouldn't have believed it, which is why we are going to show you today end-to-end how to do this in the next 23 minutes or less. So start your clocks. Let's dive in. Jumping into Hightouch, the first step that we need to do to set up our composable CDP and start to send our suppression audiences down is to hook up our data source. And our data source is going to be where our data is stored, which is most typically your data warehouse, places like Databricks, BigQuery, or Snowflake. Now, this setup is typically done by a data teammate, but I do want to go through it quickly just so you all can see how fast that this can be done. So our data team would typically come into here, enter all of our various credentials. They would add whatever settings they need, make sure that the user, the Hightouch user, has permission to actually go and read their database, which again, in this case, is going to be Snowflake. and simply just add in our password just to make sure that we have access to do so. Cool. So now I am testing my connection to Snowflake, making sure that Hightouch can read from my data warehouse and has access to the certain tables that I want to have access to. This just takes a moment. Success. Cool. All right. We're going to name this Snowflake. We're going to hit finish. So now Hightouch has access to actually read from our data source. Now, the next step would be to create the destinations that we want. In this case, I went ahead, since we have a bunch, and I actually created the destinations in advance. But all the destination settings is just adding an API key. So your data team or your engineering team, whoever it may be, would just give you that API key. You simply come in and you just add that in. Really quick step, and you can do it for any destinations. We support over 170 different ones today. Cool. So now I have my data source and I have my many destinations in place. I need to actually go and tell Hightouch what data to look at and what to expose in this UI for my marketing teams. Now, this step is actually typically also done by a data teammate, but it can be done by technical marketers as well. And all we're simply doing is saying, hey, Hightouch, here is my data model, right? Here is my customer table, and here are all the different events or related objects that I want to make available inside of Hightouch. So whether you're an organization who only has a customer table, or whether you're an organization who has a customer table with every event you would possibly want, data science models, and all these different related complex objects in your warehouse, Hightouch is simply going to be the place where you go and define what to look at, right? So that you can get started immediately with the data that you have and kind of take it one step at a time. So I'm going to come in and create my parent model, which is just going to be my user table. So in this case, my user table is just public.users. We're going to give this a second to load, and I'm simply going to select that table once this loads. There we go, public.users. I'm going to hit preview. And now I can see my different user identifiers and all the information that is in this core user table. So we're going to call this users. I'm going to set a primary key. I'm going to add a label, which just allows us in the UI as we're kind of previewing things to see the different user profiles. Cool. And now I have my parent model. So if I wanted to, I could come into Hightouch audiences and start building audiences off of just this one model, right? Like let's say you're an organization who just has a customer table. Your marketing team can move on this today. But for this case, for suppressions, we do want to tie in our purchase events. So I need to create what is called a related event. And in that related event, I'm simply going to enter a SQL query that just looks for events from my events table where the event name is order completed. So I'm going to hit preview, and I should just see a table of events that are order completed events. Cool. Now I'm going to call this purchase, add a quick description. I'm going to add a timestamp, and I'm going to tell Hightouch how to actually map between that first table or the first model and this model. And that's going to be on user ID. Cool. So now you see how these two different models are joined. So I have a one-to-many relationship, and I can add as many as I see fit. Again, you could have 100 in here. You could just have one. It's really up to you. And inside of this ERD diagram, it just gives you a really friendly UI to see what data you have available. Again, though, remember, marketing teams do not need to go and set this up. This is a one-time setup typically done by data teams alongside our Hightouch solutions team. Cool. So now that my data schema has been defined, I'm going to come in and create audiences. So for our first audience, we want to make an audience of users who have a purchase event, right? So this wouldn't necessarily be an attribute. It wouldn't be relations. It would be an event. So I'm going to look at that purchase event. And if I wanted to, I could go and add in additional things like brand or category, or say users who purchased and then did this and did not do this in this time period. But we're just going to keep things really simple and just say purchase one time. I'm going to hit preview. Hightouch is going to query on that Snowflake database and see that there are 745 different users that could fit this audience. Now, when I set up those initial tables, I could hide some of these, I could mask them for PII, whatever it may be. But you get to see in here a nice preview of the different users that would be in the audience. So I'm going to call this purchasers all time. Maybe I want to make a 7-day audience later on. And now it's been created. Cool. My audience has been created. Now Hightouch knows exactly who my purchasers are, but that doesn't really help me, right? I need to get it actually down into my marketing platforms. And the use case we talked through was Facebook for paid social and email via Iterable. So in this case, I'm going to create a sync to Facebook. Now I'm going to create a new Facebook audience for the purchasers, and I'm going to tie email to email. I'm going to tie first name, and last name to last name. And the reason I'm doing additional identifiers beyond just email is this is giving Facebook a better ability to match to users so that I can drive up my match rates, right? So it's going to hopefully give me a better chance at having 100% of these users inside of Facebook. Now, for those companies who don't have a lot of first-party data like this first name, last name, we do have a new product that's super exciting called Match Booster that helps you kind of fill in your data gaps and uses our third-party data set to go and give you additional identifiers to drive up match rates. But again, for this case, we're just going to keep going and kind of leave it as is with just the first-party data. Cool. And if I could do additional settings if I wanted to, but we're just going to leave everything as is. I would now go in and set up what is called a schedule. The schedule is where I go and tell Hightouch how often to go and update that audience. So in this case, we're going to do every 10 minutes. We're going to click finish. Now we are going to hit run. And what we just did was we hooked up Snowflake, we defined our data model, and we created an audience and synced it down into Facebook in a matter of what, 5 minutes? Right? So that's what I mean when I say the 23-minute CDP here. We are moving very, very quickly and able to do pretty advanced use cases. So now let's go and send this down into an additional platform. Let's say we want to send this down into Iterable as well. So I'm going to hit add sync. I'm going to go to Iterable. I'm going to come in and send this down as a segment to Iterable. And in this case, I only need to use an email address. And maybe I want to change the actual name of this audience to just purchasers. Cool. I'm going to hit continue. I'm going to do the interval again. I'm going to do every 10 minutes. Oops. There we go. Click finish. All right. I'm going to hit run. And now, in what, less than, I don't know, I think we got to be at like 7 minutes here. We have not only hooked up Snowflake, we've set up our entire data model, we've built an audience, we've sent it to Facebook, and now we're also sending it to Iterable as well. So we have omni-channel suppression up and running. Now, since we have plenty of time left, I'm actually going to go in and build one more audience. You all can see a couple of the more advanced use cases here. And what else you can do with Hightouch. So we're going to come in, and this time we're going to build an audience off of a property. And let's say we want to create a VIP audience of users. So we're going to go VIP equals true. We're going to hit preview. And we're going to spot check and just see how many of these users in this new MVP or VIP audience are also in this purchaser audience. Okay, so about 24% of these users are also in that original audience, which isn't too much of an overlap, so we can proceed with building this. If you wanted to, you can make some changes. You can do things like remove those audiences. So if I wanted to come into here and say, and is not included in, I could do that. But for this case, we're going to leave that as is. We can look at breakdowns on brand affinity. So maybe I want to see, hey, what is the best brand for this given audience? It looks like it's Nike at 21%. If I wanted to do things like look at pie charts, I could do that, whatever it may be. It's just giving me better insights onto that audience. So we're going to call this audience MVP. And what we're going to do is we're now going to sync this MVP audience down into Facebook and create a lookalike audience off of it. So now not only can I suppress my existing customers, I can create a lookalike audience off of my most valuable customers. So let's go into Facebook and set up the exact same mapping that we did before. Let's do first name. Hi. Cool. So now I have my mappings done. And because someone can fall in and out of MVP, maybe I want to remove them when they fall out, right? So maybe I don't want them in the Facebook audience then. So I just created my audience. And now let's say I want to just do this for a one-time sync. I'm just going to do a manual instead of setting an interval. I'm going to hit finish. Now I'm going to hit run sync. And what's going to happen right now is this MVP audience is going to be synced from Snowflake via Hightouch down into Facebook this one-time batch of 1,400 users, and now I can go in and create a lookalike off of these users, or maybe a retargeting campaign specific to them. So it's some pretty powerful stuff when you come and you think about the different type of targeting logic that you can apply using this audience builder and sending it to Facebook. So let's do one more thing. Let's actually set up a split. So we're going to come back to this audience. We're going to hit split. And what splits is going to allow us to do is actually split this audience into multivariate groups, right? So maybe I want to split this and do a holdout of 50% and see what happens to the other 50%. In this case, I'm going to do control and holdout. If I wanted to add more, I could add more. I can split distribution as much as I see fit. I can add this to say like, hey, only 50% should go to Facebook, 50% should go to Iterable. But for this case, let's just do 50% go to Facebook and 50% do not. Test is what we'll call this. Now, if we wanted to evenly distribute off of certain variables, we could do that as well to make sure that it's clean test, but we'll just turn that off. And we're going to hit save changes. And now what's going to happen is 50% of this audience is going to go to Facebook and 50% will not. So now I can start to do things like run analysis on a holdout and say, what happens when 50% go to Facebook and what happens to the other 50% who get nothing, right? And I can better understand the performance of my audience. Now, we additionally have a performance feature as well as a feature called priority lists. For sake of time, we're going to just roll through these. Performance is going to give you a better insight as to how your different audiences are performing towards metrics that you define in Hightouch. Very similar to what we call audience analytics, where you can monitor performance over time. For now, though, I'm just going to show you priority lists. So inside of priority lists, you are able to do mutual exclusions. So in this case, let's say that because I know that users fit into both MVP and purchaser audiences, I want to ensure that they only fit into one at a given time. I could just stack rank one on top of the other. So let's say I only want users who were purchasers to fit in this purchaser audience. I can stack rank that as my #1 priority. And now I'm certain that they will not any longer be in this MVP audience. I'm going to hit save, and now my priority list has been created. Cool. Well, I know that was a lot. There's a lot more to Hightouch, a lot more use cases that we can power, but for sake of time, we're going to call this one today. Over the past 23 minutes, we went in and we set up Hightouch in our composable CDP to go and power suppression use cases out to Facebook and Iterable. We set up Snowflake as our data source. We used the data that we already had in Snowflake to create our initial data models. We built our suppression audiences. We even built some MVP audiences for lookalikes. We created multi-channel split tests and priority lists to handle mutual exclusion, all in a matter of 23 minutes. And that's what we mean when we say that the composable CDP is just a far more powerful and flexible solution for marketing teams to activate their data and get started today with the data that they already have. Now, hopefully you all learned a lot over the past 23 minutes. Hopefully you have a better solution so you can stop looking like this little kid running away from our manual CSV uploads and expensive CDP implementations. And hopefully you have a better solution now moving ahead as you go and reach your marketing goals for this year. So if anyone wants to stick around, I'll answer some more questions. For those of you who can't, please stay tuned for our next episode on conversion APIs and how the composable CDP, again, in under 23 minutes, can get your team started powering your different marketing use cases. Thanks, everybody.